I stood on the threshold of my daughter's house, trying to save her from the ruins, and she shouted at me, "Go away, or I'll call the police," her voice trembling with rage and her eyes glistening with coldness. So I smiled, turned around, went and dialed the Realtor's number. If they want to lose their house so badly, then I will help them. You won't believe what I did. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Austin's face turned crimson as he slammed the credit report down on the break room table. Coffee sloshed from his mug onto the scattered papers. Bank statements I'd pulled from my jacket pocket. Printouts that told a story he never intended me to read. "Where the hell did you get these?" His voice cracked like a teenager caught stealing. I kept my tone level, the way I'd learned to speak to panicked contractors when a foundation started settling wrong. The bank called my house by mistake. Something about a late payment notice for Lindsay's address. I tapped the statement with one finger. $53,000, Austin, in gambling debts, secured against my daughter's house. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with nervous sweat. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed like angry wasps. "This doesn't concern you, old man." "Doesn't concern me?" I spread the papers across the scratched table surface. "My daughter's about to lose her home because you can't stay away from poker sites, and it doesn't concern me?" Austin's expensive watch caught the harsh light as he swept the documents aside. Papers fluttered to the linoleum floor like dying leaves. "Stay out of my business, Clarence. I handle my own affairs." "Your affairs?" I bent down, collected each sheet with the same methodical care I'd once used to organize blueprints. "These credit lines are tied to Lindsay's house, the house she thinks is safe, the house she doesn't know you've been using as collateral." "She knows," but his voice wavered. "Does she?" I straightened up, holding his gaze. "Does she know about the second mortgage? The home equity line? The loan against her 401k?" Austin turned away, staring at the vending machine humming in the corner. His shoulders tensed under his pressed shirt. "I'm handling it." "By borrowing more?" I pulled out my phone, showed him the screenshot I'd taken of his latest credit application. "This one's for $30,000, against the same house." He spun around, snatched at my phone. I pulled it back, but not before I saw something flash across his face. Not just anger, but fear. Real fear. "You don't understand," he said, but the fight was draining out of his voice. "I had a system. It was working." "Your system is about to cost my daughter her home." "Your daughter?" Austin laughed, but it sounded hollow in the small room. "She's my wife, Clarence. Has been for 3 years. Time you figured that out." I slipped my phone back into my jacket pocket. Around us, the break room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. A half-eaten sandwich sat, abandoned on the counter, curling at the edges. "I built that house's equity," I said quietly. 30 years of overtime shifts. 30 years of choosing mortgage payments over new clothes, over vacations, over everything else. And you're gambling it away. "I didn't ask for your help then, and I don't need it now." Austin grabbed his coffee mug, knuckles white against the ceramic. "Stay out of my business, or..." "Or what?" He set the mug down hard enough to crack it. Coffee seeped across the table toward my recovered papers. "Just stay out." I folded the damp documents, slipped them back into my jacket. Austin stood there, breathing hard like he'd just run a mile. The vending machine cycled off, leaving us in sudden quiet. "I'm trying to help," I said. "I don't want your help." I nodded, turned toward the door. Behind me, Austin called out something about minding my own business, about knowing my place. But I was already thinking ahead, already planning. Lindsay would listen to reason. She had to. My footsteps echoed down the empty hallway as I checked my watch. 3:30. Lindsay would be home from her shift soon, and Austin wouldn't be back until after 6. Plenty of time for a conversation that might save her house. The engine ticked as it cooled in Lindsay's driveway. Through her front window, I could see the blue glow of that massive television Austin had bought last month. The one that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. I sat for a moment, organizing my thoughts the way I'd once organized construction schedules. Step 1, show her the documents. Step 2, explain the danger. Step 3, help her find a solution. Lindsay opened the door before I could knock, phone pressed to her ear. "Mom, I have to call you back. Dad's here." She hung up, smiled that careful smile she'd been using since her wedding. This is unexpected. We need to talk. Her smile flickered. She stepped aside, gestured toward the living room, where Austin's gaming setup dominated one corner. Controllers and energy drink cans scattered across the coffee table. The house smelled like expensive candles and something else. Stress, maybe. The kind of tension that settles into walls when people fight about money. Coffee? She asked, already moving toward the kitchen. This is serious, Lindsay. She paused at the kitchen entrance, hand on the doorframe. Okay, but I'm making coffee anyway. My hands need something to do when Dad sounds like that. I followed her into the kitchen, noted the stack of bills tucked behind the toaster, the way she avoided looking at them as she busied herself with the coffee maker. Her wedding pictures covered the refrigerator, Austin prominent in every shot, his arm around her shoulders like he owned her. I found out about the gambling debts, I said. The coffee scoop clattered to the counter. What gambling debts? I pulled out the documents, spread them across the kitchen island between us. Bank statements, credit reports, loan applications, all bearing Austin's signature, all tied to her address. $53,000, maybe more. He's been using your house as collateral. Lindsay's face went white, then pink, then red. That's impossible. It's right here. I pointed to the home equity line statement. Second mortgage for $30,000, this credit line for $15,000, and this... No. She swept the papers aside, scattered them across the tile floor. Austin would never do that. He would never risk our house. Lindsay, look at the documents. These are fake. She spun away from me, gripped the counter edge. You made these up. Made them up? I knelt, gathered the papers again. Why would I do that? Because you don't like Austin. You've never liked him. Her voice rose, took on that shrill quality it got when she felt cornered. You want to break us up. I want to save your house. Our house is fine. She whirled around, eyes bright with tears. We make our payments. We've never been late. Because you don't know about these other payments. I held up the gambling site statements I'd printed. $2,300 last month. $1,500 the month before. Where do you think that money comes from? Lindsay pressed her hands over her ears. Stop it. He's borrowed against everything you own. Your car, your retirement, your house. Stop it! She lunged for her phone on the counter. Austin loves me. He would never hurt me. You're lying. I stood slowly, my knees protesting. Around us, the kitchen felt fragile somehow, like a stage set that might collapse if anyone spoke too loudly. I'm not lying, sweetheart. Don't call me that. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through her contacts. Don't you dare call me that. Lindsay, get out. The words came out strangled, desperate. Get out of my house right now. Your house? I looked around at Austin's expensive purchases, at the bills she wouldn't read, at the wedding pictures where I barely appeared. This house I helped you buy, the one I co-signed for? Get out! She raised the phone like a weapon. Get out, or I'll call the police and tell them you're harassing us. Something cold settled in my chest. Not hurt. I'd moved past hurt somewhere between the coffee maker and her covering her ears. This was something else. Something clearer. I smiled. Lindsay blinked, confused by the expression. She'd expected anger, maybe pleading. Instead, I collected my papers with the same methodical care I'd shown in Austin's break room. Each document folded precisely, slipped into my jacket pocket. You'll call the police, I said quietly. Yes, I will. But uncertainty flickered across her face. On your father, who's trying to save your house. You're not trying to save anything. You're trying to ruin my marriage. I walked toward the door, paused in the kitchen entrance. Behind me, Lindsay clutched her phone like a lifeline. I hope Austin's worth it, I said. He is. I hope the house is too. I let myself out, walked slowly to my car. Lindsay appeared in the front window, phone still pressed to her ear. Probably calling Austin, warning him about crazy dad and his fake documents. The engine started on the first try. Reliable, like everything else in my life used to be. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught Lindsay watching from behind her expensive curtains. She looked small in that big window, surrounded by all of Austin's purchases. My little girl who used to help me balance the checkbook, who used to trust me with everything. I drove home slowly, planning my next conversation. This one would be with someone who understood the value of documentation, someone who appreciated the legal weight of a cosigner's signature. My house felt unnaturally quiet after Lindsay's kitchen drama. I set my keys in the small wooden bowl by the door, the one Lindsay had made in seventh grade woodshop, and moved through rooms that suddenly seemed too large for one person. The coffee maker gurgled to life with the kind of reliable precision that used to define my whole world. While it brewed, I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at my small garden. February in Florida meant the citrus trees were heavy with fruit I'd probably eat alone. Everything I'd built here, everything I'd maintained, felt hollow now, like constructing a building only to discover the tenants had moved out without notice. The coffee was strong and black, the way I'd learned to drink it during those early mortgage years when cream was a luxury we couldn't afford. I carried the mug to my living room, settled into the recliner that had been my father's, and let the memories surface. 1994. Lindsay was 7, all gap-toothed smiles and endless questions about why Daddy had to work so many nights. I'd taken a second job at the concrete plant, mixing foundations until my back screamed and my hands cracked from the lime. 12-hour shifts at the engineering firm, then 6 more hours pouring concrete. 18 hours a day so we could make that mortgage payment 3 days early every month. "Why do you pay extra, Daddy?" Lindsay had asked once, sitting on my lap while I filled out the payment stub by hand. Her small finger traced the numbers I'd written, always $50 more than required. "Because the bank charges interest every month," I'd explained. "If we pay extra toward the principal, we save money later." She'd nodded solemnly like she understood compound interest at age 7. "So we'll own the house faster." "That's right, sweetheart. So it'll really be ours." The memory tasted bitter now, mixed with coffee and 30 years of irony. I'd scrimped and saved and calculated every extra payment, thinking I was securing her future, teaching her the value of ownership, of building equity instead of throwing money away on rent. I remembered the year we couldn't afford a vacation because the water heater died. Lindsay had cried about missing the class trip to Disney World, while I spent our vacation fund on plumbing repairs. "It's our house," I told her. "When you own something, you take care of it." But she'd forgotten that lesson somewhere between her wedding dress fittings and Austin's promises. Forgotten the nights I'd eaten peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so she could have fresh fruit in her lunchbox. Forgotten the overtime hours that paid for her college, her car, her wedding. Austin had never worked overtime in his life, never calculated mortgage payments or balanced a checkbook, or chosen between groceries and gasoline. Austin lived in a world where money appeared when needed, where consequences were abstract concepts that happened to other people, and Lindsay had chosen that world over mine. My coffee had grown cold while I'd been remembering. I set the mug on the side table, next to the photo of Lindsay at her high school graduation. She'd been so proud that day, so excited about starting college debt-free because her careful father had been planning and saving since she was 7 years old. "I did it all for her," I said aloud, my voice strange in the quiet house. But that wasn't entirely true anymore, was it? She'd made her choice when she told me to leave, when she chose Austin's lies over my documentation, when she threatened to call the police on her own father. Now I had a different choice to make. I could walk away, let Austin's gambling addiction destroy everything I'd built, let them lose the house I'd worked 18-hour days to secure. Let 30 years of sacrifice evaporate because my daughter preferred comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. Or I could fight back, not as a father trying to save his ungrateful child, not as a grandfather worried about future grandchildren having a stable home. Those motivations had died in Lindsay's kitchen when she covered her ears and called me a liar. I could fight as someone who'd been cheated, someone whose 30 years of equity was about to disappear into Austin's poker addiction. Someone who'd been dismissed and disrespected and told his opinion didn't matter. The house settled around me with small creaks in size. Everything here was paid for, maintained, organized. Proof that careful planning and steady effort created lasting value. Austin's philosophy was the opposite. Borrow against tomorrow to pay for today's pleasures. Time to see which philosophy survived a real test. I stood up, stretched muscles that remembered lifting concrete bags and crawling under houses to check foundations. My body might be older, but my mind still worked like an engineer's, problem identification, resource assessment, solution implementation. Austin and Lindsay thought they held all the cards because they had possession of the house. They'd forgotten about the documents I'd signed 30 years ago, documents that made me more than just a concerned father. I needed to review those papers, refresh my memory about exactly what rights I'd retained when I'd helped them buy their dream home. My filing cabinet waited in the home office, organized with the same precision I'd once brought to construction projects. Somewhere in those folders was the legal foundation for my next move. My filing system had saved me countless hours over the years. Everything alphabetized, dated, cross-referenced. House, Lindsay occupied an entire hanging folder in the second drawer, thick with documents spanning from her original mortgage application to last month's property tax assessment. I pulled the folder, spread its contents across my desk under the bright LED lamp I'd installed last year. My reading glasses turned the papers sharp and clear. Loan application, credit reports from 2021, income verification forms, bank statements, and there, buried beneath Lindsay's employment history, the document I'd been looking for, the original mortgage application, both our signatures at the bottom, Lindsay's careful script next to my engineer's precision printing. But it was the section above our names that made me smile for the second time that day. Co-applicant, Clarence Brooks. Social Security number. Redacted relationship to primary applicant. Father co-signer, financial responsibility. Joint and several liability for full loan amount. I leaned back in my leather desk chair, the same one I'd bought when I made supervisor 20 years ago. Joint and several liability. The phrase carried legal weight that Austin, in all his financial cleverness, had apparently forgotten. The memory came flooding back with perfect clarity. March 2021. Lindsay and Austin sitting across from loan officer Margaret Chen at First National Bank. Austin's employment history was spotty. 2 job changes in 3 years, credit score hovering around 620. Lindsay's salary as a dental hygienist was steady but modest. Together they qualified for maybe $200,000 in financing, but the house Lindsay wanted cost $340. "We'll need a cosigner," Margaret had explained, her fingers dancing across her calculator. "Someone with excellent credit and verifiable income to guarantee the full loan amount." Austin had shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means the cosigner becomes legally responsible for the debt if you default. They have the same rights and responsibilities as the primary borrowers." I'd hesitated then, my engineer's instinct for risk assessment kicking in. 40 years of steady employment, credit score over 800, substantial savings. Was I really prepared to put all of that at risk for Austin's financial stability? But Lindsay had looked at me with those eyes that had melted my resolve since she was 7 years old. "Please, Dad, we'll never miss a payment, I promise. You understand," Margaret had continued, "that as co-applicant, Mr. Brooks, you'll have legal standing regarding any major decisions about the property. Refinancing, home equity loans, even sale of the home would require your consent or participation." Austin had nodded quickly, eager to move past the legal technicalities to the fun part of house shopping. Lindsay had squeezed my hand, and I'd signed my name, thinking I was helping my daughter achieve the American dream. Now, 4 years later, with Austin's gambling debts secured against my co-signed property, those legal technicalities were looking remarkably useful. I pulled out a magnifying glass, read the fine print I'd skimmed past in 2021. The language was dense, loaded with legal terminology that would have made my head spin if I hadn't spent 40 years reading construction contracts. But one section stood out like a beacon. In the event of financial distress, default, or dispute regarding property use or disposal, all co-applicants retain equal legal standing to initiate protective measures, including but not limited to foreclosure proceedings, forced sale, or transfer of title. Forced sale. I set the document down, stared at my reflection in the dark window. Austin and Lindsay could threaten to call the police on a concerned father, but they couldn't dismiss a legal co-owner who discovered his investment was being gambled away without his consent. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to my contacts, found the number I'd saved 3 years ago when I'd helped Lindsay understand property taxes. Richard Chen, Margaret's brother, a real estate attorney who specialized in family property disputes. Tomorrow I'd make some calls. Not as a father trying to save his ungrateful daughter from her gambling husband, not as a grandfather worried about future family stability, as a co-owner protecting his investment. Austin thought he was clever, borrowing against property he didn't fully understand. Lindsay thought she could dismiss me because I was just dad, easily ignored when his opinions became inconvenient. They'd both forgotten the most important rule I'd learned in construction. Always check the foundation before you start building. And in this case, their foundation had my name all over it. I carefully returned each document to its proper place in the folder, slipped the folder back into its alphabetized position. Everything organized, everything documented, everything ready for the next phase. Phase 1 had been discovery and confrontation. Phase 2 had been attempting reconciliation. Both had failed because Austin and Lindsay were operating from emotion and denial rather than facts and legal reality. Phase 3 would be different. Phase 3 would involve people who understood the language of contracts and property law, people who wouldn't cover their ears when presented with inconvenient truths. I turned off the desk lamp, left my office in perfect order. Tomorrow would bring new conversations with new players. Tonight, for the first time since I discovered Austin's gambling debts, I felt like I might actually win this fight. After all, I'd been building foundations my whole life. I knew how to make things crumble when the support structure was compromised. And Austin's house of cards was about to discover just how solid my foundation really was. I'd barely settled into my evening routine when aggressive pounding rattled my front door. 3 sharp bursts, a pause, then 3 more. Through the peephole, Austin's face looked flushed and distorted. His expensive shirt wrinkled like he'd been pulling at it. I opened the door slowly, keeping the chain latch engaged. "Evening, Austin." "Open this door." His voice carried that edge I'd heard in the break room, but sharper now, desperate. "It's open enough for conversation." He pressed his palm against the door frame, leaning close to the gap. "Lindsay told me about your little visit, your fake documents and conspiracy theories." "Did she mention the $53,000 in gambling debts?" Austin's face went scarlet. "Those aren't gambling debts. They're business investments. Cryptocurrency, NFTs, real estate ventures. Online poker sites don't typically deal in cryptocurrency ventures." He stepped back, then forward again like a caged animal testing the bars. "You don't know what you're talking about, old man." I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone. Austin's eyes tracked the movement. "Should I call Lindsay? Ask her to come over and hear your explanation about business investments?" "Don't you dare." He pointed a trembling finger at me through the gap. "You've done enough damage to my marriage." "I haven't done anything to your marriage. Your gambling addiction is doing plenty on its own." Austin slammed his palm against the door. "It's not an addiction. I have a system. I was making money until—" He caught himself, clamped his mouth shut. "Until what?" I kept my voice level, curious. "Until nothing. Look, you need to stay out of our business. Completely out. No more surprise visits. No more fake bank statements. No more poison in Lindsay's ear." "Or what?" Austin's smile had no warmth in it. "Or things might get unpleasant for you. Lonely old men living alone. Accidents happen." I studied his face through the narrow gap. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the February chill. His left hand kept tapping against his thigh, a nervous rhythm I'd seen in desperate contractors who knew their bids were rejected. "Are you threatening me, Austin?" "I'm explaining reality." He leaned closer to the gap, and I caught the smell of alcohol mixed with his usual cologne. "Lindsay and I are happy. We're handling our finances just fine. You're not needed, not wanted, and not welcome in our lives." Interesting perspective. It's the only perspective that matters. Austin stepped back from the door, straightened his wrinkled shirt. "Stay away from us, Clarence. I mean it." I watched him walk toward his car, a BMW I now knew he couldn't afford. The engine started with the smooth purr of German engineering, purchased with borrowed money. He backed out of my driveway too fast, tires squealing slightly on the asphalt. I closed the door, slid the chain free, then engaged the deadbolt. Through my living room window, I watched Austin's taillights disappear around the corner. His visit had accomplished the opposite of its intention. Instead of intimidating me, it had confirmed that legal action was my only remaining option. Austin was spiraling. The gambling addiction he wouldn't admit to was consuming not just his money, but his judgment. Threatening a man in his own home, making vague references to accidents. These weren't the actions of someone in control of his situation. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I'd saved earlier. Richard Chen, Realtor. Tomorrow morning I'd begin transforming my legal discovery into concrete action. Austin thought he could intimidate me into silence. He'd forgotten that I'd spent 40 years dealing with contractors who promised the impossible, then threatened lawsuits when reality intervened. The difference was, this time, I held the legal cards, and unlike Austin, I knew exactly how to play them. Richard Chen's office occupied a corner suite in a glass building downtown, with market charts covering one wall and a view of the city's expanding skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. He stood when I entered, extending a firm handshake that reminded me why I'd trusted him to help Lindsay understand property taxes 3 years ago. "Clarence, good to see you again, though I suspect this isn't a social call. I need a current market analysis." I settled into the leather chair across from his desk, pulled out the folder containing Lindsay's property information. "This address, full comparative market analysis, current conditions." Richard opened his laptop, began typing. "This is your daughter's place, isn't it? The one we worked on tax assessments for?" "It is." His fingers paused over the keyboard. "Everything okay with the family?" "Let's focus on the numbers first." Richard nodded, returned to his screen. I watched him work, the same methodical approach that had impressed me during our previous dealings. Charts appeared, neighborhood comparisons, recent sales data. After 20 minutes, he leaned back. "In this market, you're looking at 460,000, maybe 470 with the right buyer. The neighborhood's appreciated significantly since 2021. I made notes in my pocket notebook. Original purchase price was 340. Nice equity buildup. Current mortgage balance would be what? Around 280? 293, plus the additional 53,000 Austins borrowed against it. Richard's professional expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Additional borrowing, home equity line, multiple credit lines, all secured by the property. I see. Richard closed his laptop, leaned forward slightly. "Clarence, are we talking about a forced sale situation?" "We're talking about a legal partition action. I'm a co-signer on the original mortgage." Understanding dawned across Richard's face. Co-applicant rights. That changes everything. He reopened his laptop, pulled up different screens. Partition suits typically result in court-ordered sales. Timeline varies, but buyers know it's a motivated seller situation. Meaning? Meaning you're looking at quick sale pricing, 420, 430 range. Still substantial equity, but not maximum value. I calculated quickly. 420 minus 293 in original mortgage, minus 53 in Austin's debts, minus legal fees and real estate commissions. Roughly 70,000 net proceeds, split between the parties according to their ownership percentage. Which brings us to my next appointment. Richard handed me his business card, wrote a phone number on the back. "That's my direct line. When you're ready to move forward, call me first. Partition sales require special handling." I shook his hand again, left his office with clarity about the financial landscape. Now I needed legal clarity about the procedural landscape. Donald Kessler's law office felt different. Darker wood, heavier furniture, walls lined with legal volumes that looked actually used rather than decorative. Donald himself was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the careful precision of movement that came from courtroom experience. "Partition actions aren't common in family situations," he said after reviewing my documents. "Usually we see them in business disputes or inherited property conflicts." "What's the difference?" "Emotional complexity. Business partners might hate each other, but they understand spreadsheets. Family members, well, they take everything personally." Donald spread my mortgage papers across his conference table. "As co-applicant, you have more rights than you might think. You're not just a co-signer who guaranteed the debt. You're a legal co-owner of the property." "Meaning?" "Meaning Austin and Lindsay can't make unilateral decisions about refinancing, additional borrowing, or sale without your consent. They've already violated that with these gambling debts." Donald pointed to specific clauses in the loan documents. Florida law provides remedies for co-owners who can't agree on property use. Partition by sale is the nuclear option, forces a sale through court order, divides proceeds according to ownership percentages. Timeline? 30 to 90 days, depending on court schedule and whether they contest. Filing the petition starts a clock they can't stop. I made more notes, asked about costs, procedures, potential complications. Donald answered each question with the thoroughness I appreciated in competent professionals. "One warning," he said as we concluded. "Once you file, there's no going back. This will permanently damage your relationship with your daughter." I thought about Lindsay's threat to call police, about Austin's visit to my home, about 30 years of mortgage payments being gambled away. "I think that relationship is already damaged beyond repair." Donald nodded, began preparing paperwork. "We'll file first thing Monday morning." I drove home through afternoon traffic, my mind organizing the next phase like a construction project. Foundation complete, legal research finished, materials ordered, professionals engaged, permits pulled, court filings scheduled. Now came the hard part, construction phase, where careful planning met unpredictable reality. But unlike construction projects, this one had a guaranteed outcome. Austin and Lindsay would learn that legal documents weren't suggestions, and co-signers weren't just financial ornaments. They'd learn that some foundations couldn't be shaken, even when everything built on top of them was crumbling. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of February day that made Florida feel almost like winter. I dressed carefully, my good suit, the navy one I'd worn to Lindsay's wedding, along with the tie she'd given me last Father's Day. If we were going to court, I'd dress for court. Donald met me in the courthouse parking lot, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen plenty of legal battles. "Ready for this?" "I've been ready since Friday." The courthouse steps were imposing, white limestone with columns that suggested permanence, justice, consequences that couldn't be argued away. Inside, metal detectors and security guards processed a steady stream of people handling legal business. Divorces, custody disputes, civil matters, criminal arraignments, all the ways life ended up requiring official intervention. We took an elevator to the third floor, walked down a corridor lined with courtroom doors. The clerk of court's office buzzed with quiet efficiency, computers humming, printers working, people filing documents that would change lives. "Final review," Donald said, spreading our petition across a small table in the waiting area. "Petition for partition by sale, listing you as co-owner, Austin and Lindsay as co-defendants, property address, legal description, current liens and encumbrances." I read through each page carefully. My name appeared throughout the document, not as father or co-signer, but as plaintiff and co-owner. Legal language that transformed family relationships into property rights. "The filing fee is $450, Donald said, plus service of process costs for both defendants." I wrote the check without hesitation. 40 years of steady employment had taught me that some problems required financial solutions. This was cheaper than watching Austin gamble away my 30 years of equity payments. At the clerk's window, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes processed our paperwork with professional efficiency. "Case number CV 2025-187, she said, stamping each document with an official seal. "Initial hearing scheduled for March 15th, 9 a.m., courtroom C." The sound of the stamp was final, decisive. No more family discussions or emotional appeals. No more Austin's threats or Lindsay's denial. Just legal process, moving forward according to rules that couldn't be manipulated or ignored. "Service of process will be completed within 5 business days," the clerk continued. "Defendants have 30 days from service to file a response." Donald collected our certified copies, receipts, official notifications. "That's it. The machinery is in motion." We walked back through the courthouse corridors, past other people beginning or ending their legal battles. In the elevator, Donald reviewed the next steps. "They'll be served by Friday. Then we wait for their response, or more likely their panic. What if they try to refinance? Transfer the property? They can't. The LI's pendants we filed prevents any transfers or major financial changes until the case is resolved. I felt something settle in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, but the relief that comes from proper preparation. like finishing a foundation pour and knowing it would cure correctly, support whatever was built on top. In the parking lot, Donald and I shook hands. I'll call you after they're served. Should be interesting. I drove home slowly, taking surface streets instead of the highway. My car radio played soft jazz while I processed what we'd accomplished. For the first time in weeks, Austin and Lindsay's choices couldn't affect me. The legal system would handle everything now, according to rules they'd have to follow, whether they liked them or not. At home, I filed my certified copies in the House Lindsay folder, right behind the original mortgage documents. Everything organized, everything documented, everything ready for whatever came next. My phone sat silent on the kitchen counter. Soon, very soon, it would start ringing. Austin and Lindsay would receive official papers from a sheriff's deputy, would realize this wasn't family drama they could dismiss with tears or threats. I made coffee, settled into my recliner, and waited. The next move was theirs, but the game was now being played by my rules. My phone started ringing Thursday afternoon. Lindsay's name appeared on the caller ID as I sat in my kitchen finishing a late lunch. I watched it buzz against the counter, let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Austin this time. I went to my living room, picked up a book, tried to read while my phone continued its electronic tantrum. By evening, I had 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails. The first message was Lindsay, her voice shaking. "Dad, please call me back. We got some papers today and I don't understand what's happening. Please just call me." Austin's message came an hour later. "What kind of game are you playing, old man? You think you can scare us with legal papers? This is family business, not some courtroom drama." The third message, Lindsay again, tears evident in her voice. "Dad, I'm begging you. Austin says you're trying to steal our house. That can't be true. Please call me back. Please." I deleted all 3 messages without returning the calls. Friday brought a text message marathon. Austin started early. "This lawsuit is ridiculous. No judge will side with you over family." Lindsay's texts were longer, more desperate. "Dad, I know we had a fight, but this is too far. Can't we work this out? I love you, but I love Austin too. Please don't make me choose." By evening, Austin's messages had turned threatening. "You're making a big mistake, bigger than you realize." I showed the text to Donald when he called with confirmation that both defendants had been served. "Standard reaction," he said. "Panic, denial, then anger. What matters is whether they file a response by the deadline." What if they don't? Default judgment. The court grants our petition automatically. Saturday brought a new wave of calls. I let them all go to voicemail, spent the day in my garden, pruning citrus trees and preparing beds for spring planting. Physical work helped me think, and I needed to consider my next moves carefully. Sunday's voicemail from Lindsay was different, calmer, more calculated. "Dad, Austin talked to a lawyer. He says this partition thing is just a scare tactic, that you don't really want to sell our house, you just want attention, so we're not going to play along. We're ignoring this whole legal circus until you come to your senses." I played that message twice, then called Donald. "They're not filing a response?" he asked. "Austin thinks it's a bluff." "Perfect. That's exactly what we want them to think." Monday morning brought silence. No calls, no texts, no voicemails. Austin and Lindsay had decided to ignore the legal system, confident that family relationships trumped property law. I spent the morning organizing my files, making sure everything was ready for the default hearing. Around noon, I drove to the courthouse and reviewed public records. Sure enough, no response filed by either defendant. That evening, I called Richard to schedule the property appraisal required for court-ordered sale. "They're not contesting?" he asked. "They think it's a family dispute that doesn't require legal response." Richard whistled softly. "That's going to cost them about $100,000 in equity." Tuesday brought one final voicemail from Austin, his voice carrying less conviction than before. "Look, Clarence, maybe we all got a little heated. Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? We can work this out like family." I deleted the message and made coffee. Outside my kitchen window, my citrus trees were heavy with fruit, oranges and grapefruits that had taken years to mature, requiring patience and consistent care to reach their potential. Austin and Lindsay had made their choice. They'd decided that legal documents were suggestions, that court deadlines were optional, that property law didn't apply to their situation. In 2 weeks, they'd discover how wrong they were, but by then it would be too late to change their minds. The legal machinery I'd set in motion would complete its work, regardless of their family feelings or desperate last-minute appeals. I'd given them every opportunity to address the problem responsibly. They'd chosen gambling debts over family discussions, threats over honest conversation, denial over legal reality. Now they'd live with the consequences of those choices, whether they understood them or not. Donald's call came Wednesday morning while I was watering my citrus trees. "I need to discuss something with you," he said, his voice carrying the careful tone lawyers use when delivering unwelcome news. "Can you meet me at my office this afternoon?" I arrived at 2 o'clock sharp, found him reviewing a thick file folder. "Partition disputes can get ugly," he began without preamble, "especially when defendants realize they're actually going to lose their property. Austin's already made threats. That's what concerns me." Donald pulled out several case studies, spread them across his desk. Property disputes involving gambling addicts follow predictable patterns. First denial, then anger, then desperate actions. I studied the documents. Police reports, restraining orders, incidents of vandalism and intimidation. You're suggesting I'm in physical danger. I'm suggesting that staying in your current home might not be wise while this plays out. The idea hadn't occurred to me, but as Donald outlined the risks, it made strategic sense. Austin was spiraling, his gambling addiction consuming not just money, but judgment. Cornering desperate people in their own homes rarely ended well. That evening, I drove through apartment complexes near downtown, looking for temporary housing that met my criteria. Month-to-month lease, furnished, good security, reasonable proximity to the courthouse. The Palmetto Gardens complex fit perfectly, modest but clean with coded entry and an office manager who asked no unnecessary questions. "How long do you anticipate staying?" she asked while processing my application. 2 to 3 months, depending on legal proceedings. She nodded professionally, handed me keys to Unit 2B. Utilities included, parking space 47. I spent Thursday evening packing essentials, clothes for 3 months, legal documents, basic personal items. Everything else stayed behind. The family photos on my mantel, the tools in my garage, the furniture I'd accumulated over 40 years of steady employment. All of it would wait for my return, assuming I chose to return. Friday morning, I loaded my truck with 3 suitcases and a box of legal files. Before leaving, I walked through each room of my house, checking windows, adjusting the thermostat, making sure everything was secure. In the kitchen, I stopped mail delivery and set up forwarding to my new address. The house would sit empty but protected, like a foundation waiting for construction to resume. The apartment felt strange after 30 years in my own home. Generic furniture, neutral colors, no history attached to any corner or surface. But it also felt safe, anonymous, removed from the emotional battlefield my family had created. I sat in the unfamiliar living room, looking out at a parking lot instead of my garden, and felt something unexpected: relief. For the first time in weeks, my phone wasn't ringing with threats or emotional manipulation. No one knew where I was, except Donald and Richard, both bound by professional confidentiality. Austin and Lindsay could rage and scheme and threaten all they wanted. They'd be performing for an empty house, their anger echoing through rooms that no longer contained their target. My truck keys sat on the kitchen counter of apartment 2B, ready for whatever came next. The legal machinery would continue its work regardless of where I slept or ate breakfast. Court dates would proceed. Property evaluations would be completed. Sale orders would be executed. The difference was that now I could watch it all unfold, from a position of safety and strategic distance. Austin's gambling addiction was his problem. Lindsay's denial was her choice. The consequences of both were no longer my daily burden to carry. I unpacked my clothes into the apartment's small bedroom dresser, each item representing a practical decision to prioritize my well-being over family chaos. For 40 years, I'd been the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who solved other people's problems. Now I was solving my own problem, and the solution felt surprisingly liberating. From my apartment window, I could see the courthouse's clock tower 6 blocks away. Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 week after my relocation, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Appraiser completed evaluation. Report filed with court. Market analysis confirms our projections. 20 minutes later, my phone started ringing. Lindsay's number appeared on the screen, followed immediately by Austin's. I let both calls go to voicemail, made coffee, and waited. The voicemails revealed everything I needed to know. Lindsay, her voice shaking. Dad, someone came to our house today. A man with a clipboard and camera, measuring everything, taking pictures. He said it was court-ordered for something called partition sale. Dad, please call me. I'm scared. Austin barely controlled fury. What kind of sick game is this, Clarence? You sent some appraiser to our house? Our neighbors saw him, asked questions. You're embarrassing us. Call me back. Now. I deleted both messages, opened my laptop, checked the court's electronic filing system. The appraiser's report was already uploaded. $437,000 valuation, with detailed photographs and condition assessments. Professional, thorough, devastating. My phone buzzed again. Text from Lindsay. Dad, please just talk to us. We can work this out. Then Austin. This has gone far enough. Call me or I'm coming to your house. I smiled, knowing he'd find my house empty, my mailbox filling with forwarded correspondence he couldn't intercept. More calls throughout the evening. 7 from Lindsay, 4 from Austin, each voicemail more desperate than the last. Lindsay. Dad, I drove by your house. Your truck isn't there. Where are you? Why won't you talk to me? I know you're angry, but this is too much. Austin. You can't hide forever, old man. I found out appraiser was hired by some law firm. This isn't over. By Friday morning, they'd discovered the legal filing. Austin's voicemail was different, smaller, frightened. I talked to a lawyer. He says you can actually force us to sell our house, that we should have responded to the court papers. Clarence, please, can we meet somewhere? Can we figure this out? I spent Friday afternoon in the courthouse law library, researching similar cases, finding comfort in the systematic way legal precedent created predictable outcomes. Property law didn't care about hurt feelings or family dynamics. It cared about documents, signatures, ownership percentages, established procedures. Saturday brought a new wave of communication. Emails this time, since I'd stopped answering calls. From Lindsay's email account. Dad, I understand you're angry. Maybe I was wrong to threaten to call police. Maybe Austin has been borrowing too much money. But forcing us to sell our home? This will destroy our credit, our marriage, our future. Please don't do this. From Austin. Look, I admit I have a gambling problem. I'll get help. Gamblers, anonymous, counseling, whatever you want. Just stop this lawsuit. We can pay you back over time. I forwarded both emails to Donald with a brief note. For the file. Sunday evening, my phone rang 15 times. I turned off the ringer, went to bed early. Monday morning brought new developments. Richard called with updates. 3 potential buyers submitted offers over the weekend. All cash, quick closing. The forced sale pricing is attracting serious interest. How much? Highest offer is $425. $10,000 below appraisal, but guaranteed 30-day closing. While I was talking to Richard, my phone buzzed with another call. Austin again. This time, when it went to voicemail, I could hear Lindsay crying in the background. Austin's voice defeated. Clarence, I know you can hear me. We drove around looking for your truck, asked your old neighbors if they knew where you went. No one knows anything. You disappeared like you planned this whole thing. A long pause, then. We're going to lose our house, aren't we? The lawyer says we waited too long to respond, that the court will just take it away from us. 30 days. We have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Another pause. I'm sorry. Lindsay's sorry, too. We were wrong about everything. The gambling, the threats, telling you to stay away. But please don't make us homeless. We're family. I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to Donald with a note. Evidence of acknowledgement. Family? They'd discovered that word again, now that legal consequences were bearing down on them. Family hadn't mattered when they'd covered their ears and called me a liar. Family hadn't mattered when Austin threatened me in my own home. Family hadn't mattered when Lindsay chose his gambling addiction over my 30 years of sacrifice. But now, facing the loss of their home, suddenly we were family again. The irony was perfect, and perfectly meaningless. Legal proceedings would continue regardless of their newfound appreciation for family relationships. The house would be sold, the proceeds divided according to ownership percentages, and justice would be served through proper channels. I made dinner in my temporary kitchen, watched the courthouse clock tower through my window, and felt the satisfaction that comes from seeing carefully planned strategies produce their intended results. The for sale sign appeared on Tuesday morning. I didn't see it installed. That happened while I was at the bank, depositing a small consulting check from my former employer. But Richard called with photo confirmation, professional yard sign, multiple listings service number, motivated seller, rider attached below. We already have showing appointments scheduled for this afternoon, Richard said. 2 cash buyers, 1 investment group. The below-market pricing is generating serious interest. I asked him to email me the listing photos. My laptop screen filled with images of Lindsay's house. Their house, technically, though legal ownership was more complicated than they'd ever understood. Professional photography made every room look spacious and bright. Austin's expensive gaming setup had been pushed into corners, Lindsay's decorative touches minimized to appeal to potential buyers. Their home had become a commodity, which was exactly what it had always been from the legal system's perspective. Wednesday brought the official documentation, certified mail to my apartment, notice of partition sale with specific timelines, buyer qualification requirements, and closing procedures. 30 days for current occupants to vacate voluntarily, followed by sheriff's assistance if necessary. I forwarded the documents to Donald, called to confirm next steps. Everything's proceeding normally, he said. They haven't filed any motions to delay or contest, which suggests they've finally accepted reality. Or they're planning something desperate. Possibly, but legally there's nothing they can do at this point. The sale will complete regardless of their cooperation. Thursday afternoon, Richard called with updates. We accepted the offer from the cash buyer. $425,000, 15-day closing, no contingencies. Your net proceeds will be approximately $78,000 after legal fees, real estate commissions, and outstanding mortgage balance. $78,000. Not a fortune, but substantial compensation for 30 years of mortgage payments on a house I'd never lived in. Money that represented justice served through proper legal channels, rather than family emotional manipulation. When do they need to be out? Closing is scheduled for March 28th. They need to vacate by March 25th to allow final walkthrough and key transfer. I marked the dates on my calendar, felt something settle in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, but the calm that comes from seeing complex projects reach completion on schedule. Friday brought a surprise. Lindsay appeared at my old house, saw my truck wasn't there, sat on my front porch for an hour waiting. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, called to tell me. She looked terrible, Mrs. Patterson said, crying, checking her phone constantly. Finally left a note under your door and drove away. I drove over that evening, retrieved the note. Lindsay's handwriting, usually neat, looked shaky. Dad, I know you're avoiding us, but we're running out of time. We found an apartment but need first month, last month, security deposit, moving costs. Austin's trying to get a loan, but his credit is destroyed from the gambling. Could you please just talk to us? We're going to be homeless in 3 weeks. Your granddaughter, Lindsay. She'd signed it, your granddaughter, Lindsay, as if reminding me of our relationship would change my legal strategy, as if family sentiment could override property law and court orders. I filed the note with my other legal documents and drove back to my apartment. The weekend passed quietly. My phone didn't ring. Austin and Lindsay had apparently exhausted their communication attempts. Sunday evening, Richard called with final details. Closing scheduled for Thursday, March 28th, 10 a.m. Bank attorney, buyer's attorney, and myself. You don't need to attend unless you want to. I'll be there. Excellent. Bring photo ID and social security card. We'll handle everything else. March 25th arrived gray and windy. From my apartment, I could see moving trucks on several streets. Late winter was popular for relocations. I wondered if Austin and Lindsay had managed to find their moving truck, their new apartment, their temporary solution to the consequences of their choices. My phone remained silent. No last-minute pleas, no final attempts at emotional manipulation. They'd apparently accepted that their former relationship with me was over, replaced by legal procedures they couldn't influence or avoid. Thursday morning, I dressed in my good suit, gathered my identification documents, and prepared to attend the closing that would officially end this chapter of my life. The legal system had worked exactly as Donald promised. Property disputes were resolved through established procedures, rather than family arguments. Justice was served through professional channels, rather than emotional appeals. In 4 hours, I'd receive a check that represented vindication of every principle I'd tried to teach Lindsay about financial responsibility, legal consequences, and the importance of treating family members with respect. Whether she'd learned those lessons remained to be seen, but the teaching phase was definitely over. The closing took place in a sterile conference room downtown, fluorescent lights humming over documents requiring signatures. Proceeds to plaintiff Clarence Brooks, the bank attorney read, $78,437. I signed where indicated, watched 40 years of property involvement reduced to electronic transfers and official stamps. By noon, my phone buzzed with bank confirmation of the substantial deposit, more money than I'd seen at once since retirement. Richard shook my hand in the parking lot. "Pleasure working with you, Clarence." Donald was more direct. "Justice served." Back at my apartment, I found a voicemail from Lindsay. "Dad, we moved out yesterday. Austin found a job in Jacksonville, so we're starting over there. I wanted to say I understand now. About the money, about Austin's gambling, about why you did what you did. I'm sorry it took losing our house for me to see it. I hope someday you'll forgive us. I love you." I played the message twice, then deleted it. Understanding consequences was different from earning reconciliation. Over the weekend, I toured condominiums in a golf course community. Most of our owners are former engineers, teachers, middle management, the sales agent explained, people who saved consistently and planned for retirement, people who understood that financial security came from systematic effort rather than gambling schemes, people who treated legal documents as binding rather than suggestions. I made an offer on a corner unit with a garden view. Austin and Lindsay were starting over in Jacksonville with damaged credit and expensive lessons about disrespecting family and legal obligations. They'd chosen threats and denial over responsibility, assuming family relationships exempted them from consequences. Thursday afternoon, I walked through my new condo, sunlight streaming through windows overlooking the golf course. I'd join the retirees there soon, not as someone fleeing family obligations, but as someone who'd successfully defended his legal rights against people who'd mistaken kindness for weakness. Justice had been served, lessons had been learned, and I had a new life to build, funded by principles systematically executed through proper legal channels. The foundation was solid. Construction could begin whenever I was ready. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.